Welcome to Sports Science in 3 Minutes, Will O'Connor, PhD. This topic is close to my heart because it is what I researched and wrote a small book on it actually. So it's metabolic flexibility and low carbohydrate, coupled in with endurance exercise. The whole principle around low carb is really interesting in terms of endurance exercise, and I think a lot of people are missing the fundamentals of why you should use a low carbohydrate diet or nutritional approach to endurance exercise. And I just want to go over the metabolic flexibility aspect of it, which is really the big gain in using a low carbohydrate diet for endurance exercise, and potentially other sides of things, but let's just focus on endurance for now. So it all centers around this graph. Now, this is a graph which shows you the profile of a race or the intensity of a training session. So obviously the lows are easy intensity or the beginning of a hill, and as we go up the hill, you can see that on the bottom you're metabolically inflexible, so that's someone who eats predominantly carbohydrate, avoids fat, and also maybe is not very aerobically trained. So you can see once they get halfway into their interval or halfway up the hill, they start tapping into the red, which is the carbohydrate. Now carbohydrate is finite. There's only a certain amount, around 500 grams, we can store within our body, and predominantly in the muscles. So once we start tapping into that carbohydrate, that limited resource for energy, we are in a position of diminishing returns. So then you can see on the bottom graph, if you continue to play out the rest of your session, the rest of the exercise, the profile of the race, you continue to tap into the red. And what's really important here is that when you see on the downside, or the recovery of the interval, or the downside of a hill, where there is no real intensity, you should be recovering, the bottom graph, the metabolically inflexible, is still using carbohydrate. And this is particularly important for endurance and ultra endurance events, because we don't want to be traveling down a hill not expending any energy while still using carbohydrate. So if we look at the top graph of the metabolically flexible athlete, they are able to get through their first interval or hill climb and only tap into the carbohydrate at the very top. Now, this is coupled and sort of doubly important that on the downside of the interval or the hill or the effort, they quickly convert back or rely back upon fat as their main fuel source. So then by the time they get into the next, the second and the third and further down the race, you start to see the true difference. And this, if we look at the very last peak, imagine that's the decisive climb or the final sprint for a race, and the bottom graph shows how much carbohydrate you've already burnt in order to get to the top of that hill. Now potentially you've run out, and that then puts the top graph, the individual with metabolic flexibility, in the best position to capitalize on their higher fat burning rates. So when we look at that is the principle behind removing carbohydrate from your diet and promoting fat oxidation, reducing reliance on carbohydrate. And that's sort of the basics of how it works. So it's actually your flexibility, your metabolic flexibility, to be able to burn both carbohydrate and fat, as opposed to a switch of using one or the other. It's really how efficiently you can use both to produce the best possible outcome. That's 3 minutes. Peace out.